The Whitman estate gleamed in the fading glow of the evening sun, its sprawling lawns cut with surgical precision, its marble pillars catching fire in the last golden light. From the outside, the mansion was a portrait of wealth, success, and stability, the kind of image David Whitman had built his entire life upon. He had learned early in business that appearances mattered, that clients and rivals alike were swayed by polish and grandeur. But appearances, as David was about to discover, had a way of deceiving. He stepped through the front door earlier than expected, suitcase swinging by his side, tie loosened after a day of endless meetings. The polished oak floor reflected his image back at him, perfect, glossy, untouchable. Yet something in the air made him pause. Silence. Not the soft hum of a household winding down, not the cheerful chatter of staff, not even the faint background noise of music or television. Just silence, so heavy it felt unnatural. He frowned, scanning the foyer. A scarf, violet with delicate embroidery, lay crumpled on the arm of a chair. He picked it up, recognizing Aisha's perfume clinging to its fabric, but the way it had been twisted, clenched, unsettled him. He moved deeper into the house, shoes echoing against the marble tiles, each step louder than the last. His eyes traced familiar corners, familiar paintings, yet everything felt foreign, as though the house itself was holding its breath. When he reached the nursery, the sight waiting for him hollowed out his chest. Aisha, his young wife, sat on the floor beside the unfinished crib, one hand over her swollen belly, the other covering her face. Her shoulders trembled, her makeup streaked with tears, failing to hide the dark bruises blooming along her jaw. For a moment, David couldn't move. His empire, his fortune, his world, all meaningless compared to the sight before him. He dropped the scarf, the sound of fabric hitting the floor impossibly loud. "Aisha," he whispered, voice cracking. The word struck David like a blade slipped between his ribs, sharp, merciless, impossible to ignore. For a man who had negotiated billion-dollar mergers without blinking, who had stared down rivals across oak tables and come out victorious, nothing could have prepared him for the quiet devastation in his wife's eyes. He crouched beside her, reaching for her trembling hand, but her fingers remained stiff in his palm, unyielding, as though some invisible wall had risen between them. His gaze dropped to the faint purple marks climbing her arm, the shadow of a bruise curling along her jawline, and the story she had always told him. Another fall, another accident, crumbled into ash. He wanted to demand answers, to rage, to storm through every corner of the estate until the truth stood exposed. But he could see how fragile she was, how exhaustion and fear clung to her every breath. Pushing too hard now would shatter her further. Instead, he gathered her close, lowering his voice to a whisper meant only for her. "Who did this to you?" Her silence was worse than denial. She shook her head slowly, her dark hair falling like a curtain to hide her tears. "It doesn't matter," she murmured. "It always matters," David insisted, but she pressed her face into his chest, refusing to meet his eyes. Through the open nursery window drifted faint voices, two staff members in the garden, speaking in hushed tones. "Poor madam. She doesn't smile like she used to. Careful. The old lady comes by too often. People notice things." The words sliced through the night air like fragments of glass, and David's pulse quickened. His mother, Eleanor Whitman, immaculate, commanding, untouchable, a woman whose presence dominated every room, whose approval he had once chased like currency. He closed his eyes, a storm gathering beneath his calm. Could it be her? Could the same woman who had shaped him into the man he was also be capable of this cruelty? He wanted to dismiss the thought, but the bruises on. David lingered in the nursery long after Aisha's tears had quieted into exhausted silence. He guided her gently to the bed, tucking a blanket around her fragile frame, his hand resting a moment longer on the curve of her belly. Their child shifted faintly beneath her skin, a reminder of the life that depended on both of them. He kissed her forehead softly, though her eyes never opened, and then he slipped from the room with deliberate care, shutting the door until only a sliver of light remained. The corridor stretched before him like a tunnel, the air dense with secrets. His polished shoes carried him toward the study, each step heavier than the last, each echo louder in the silence. When he entered, the faint hum of electronics greeted him. In the corner, a matte black monitor waited, blank and patient. His hands hovered above the desk, as though the decision itself might burn him. Watching meant confirming the suspicions that clawed at his chest. Watching meant the illusion of family loyalty might fracture forever. He braced his palms against the leather blotter, head bowed, shoulders tense, before finally punching in the code. The screen flickered to life, tiling images of the previous day. At first, everything appeared normal. A housekeeper carried folded laundry through the hall. A gardener trimmed roses near the back gate. Sunlight crawled across marble floors in time-lapse stillness. David scrubbed the footage forward, his jaw clenching with each passing frame. Then, at precisely 3:12 p.m., the kitchen feed shifted. His mother entered through the back door, her posture regal, her pearl earrings glinting under the lights. Eleanor Whitman moved with the precision of someone born to command, every gesture sharp, every step purposeful. David leaned closer, unease tightening in his throat. The first minutes seemed harmless. Cool smiles exchanged with Aisha, perfunctory words. But then, in the subtle tilt of Eleanor's chin, the cold narrowing of her eyes, the truth. David's heart pounded as he replayed the scene, unable to tear his gaze from the cruel choreography unfolding on the screen. His mother's elegant hand darted forward, seizing Aisha's arm with a practiced grip that spoke of authority, not affection. He watched as she shoved his wife against the counter, her face twisted in silent protest, her free hand bracing to steady both herself and the life growing inside her. David's jaw locked so tight it ached. He rewound the footage, hoping he had imagined it, praying it was some trick of the angle. But no, the truth stared back at him in brutal clarity. The woman who had once cradled him as a child, who had guided him through the ruthless games of wealth and influence, had now turned that same ruthless power against his wife. His stomach churned. His hands trembled against the desk. He thought of the whispered voices of the staff, the bruises Aisha had dismissed as accidents, the way she had begun to shrink into herself. The pieces aligned into a picture he wanted desperately to deny, but denial could not erase the bruises, nor could it quiet the tremor in his wife's voice when she asked if she was unworthy. David pressed forward in the footage, each new frame digging deeper into his resolve. Eleanor lingered in the nursery doorway, her silhouette sharp against the unfinished crib. She folded her arms, gazing at it as though the very idea of her grandchild offended her. Moments later, she blocked Aisha's path with a chair, lips forming words that carried the weight of judgment. Then came the slap, swift, unceremonious, a strike that needed no sound to echo. Aisha steadied herself on the counter, eyes blinking rapidly as if swallowing back tears that refused to fall. Outside the study, footsteps passed and faint voices drifted by. She's covering her cheek again. I wish he'd notice. David shut his eyes, the words cutting deeper than any blade. He had noticed now, and he could never unsee it. His fists unclenched only when The night stretched long and restless as David sat alone in the study, the glow of the monitor washing his face in cold light. He replayed the clips again and again, each cycle hammering the same reality deeper into his bones. His mother, had become the source of his wife's suffering. Rage burned in his chest, demanding release, but rage alone would not protect Aisha or their unborn child. He thought of Eleanor's gift for performance, the way she could summon tears at will, her voice quivering with fabricated indignation, her reputation spotless among the city's elite. If he stormed into her world with accusations, she would simply spin the story, cast herself as victim, paint Aisha as the outsider poisoning their family. No, truth must stand alone, stripped of denial, undeniable. Slowly, David leaned back in his chair, his mind shaping a plan with the precision of an architect. He would give Eleanor the stage she craved, but this time every spotlight would belong to him. Every word, every gesture, every act of cruelty would be captured in sharp detail. Cameras running, audio live, no room for escape. He envisioned it clearly, a quiet departure, a parked car hidden down the street, his eyes fixed on the feeds. He would not intervene until the evidence was irrefutable, until no one, not even Eleanor herself, could dispute what she had done. For Aisha, for their child, for the air in this house to be safe again. He powered down the monitor, the screen shrinking into a pinprick of light before vanishing. Darkness reclaimed the room, heavy and suffocating. Rising slowly, he placed a steady hand on the edge of a framed photograph on the credenza, his parents at a ribbon-cutting ceremony, smiling as though nothing in the world could touch them. His reflection overlapped theirs in the glass, fractured and uneasy. He straightened the frame, then withdrew his hand, the decision etched into his bones. The storm inside him settled into cold determination. He would know Lon. Morning arrived pale and brittle, the kind of dawn that carried no warmth, only a hushed chill. David lay still beside Aisha, listening to the fragile rhythm of her breathing. Every few minutes, her body shuddered with a tremor she could not control, even in sleep. He reached out, brushing her hair gently away from her face, but she did not stir. A bruise bloomed faintly beneath her eye, a silent accusation that clawed at his conscience. He kissed her forehead before slipping quietly out of bed. Downstairs, the house moved through its motions. The kettle hissed, the toaster clicked, the faint scurry of staff filled the silence. Everything appeared normal, but the veneer felt thinner than glass. Aisha moved slowly through the kitchen, buttering toast she never ate, eyes fixed downward. When the butter knife grazed her wrist, she flinched, just a flicker, so slight anyone else might have missed it. But David saw it, and the sight hollowed him. He closed his laptop with deliberate force, the snap louder than intended. "Did you sleep?" he asked gently. She nodded too quickly. "Will you rest after breakfast?" Another nod, rehearsed and fragile. Her answers were delivered with practiced smoothness, as though each word had been tested in a mirror before spoken. Beyond the open window, two groundskeepers walked past, their voices pitched low, carrying the weight of unspoken truths. "She doesn't laugh anymore." "She'll. If the old lady hears, it'll be worse." The conversation faded, but its sting remained. David rinsed a mug that wasn't dirty, drying it too long before setting it on the rack. He kissed Aisha on the temple, murmuring something about calls he needed to take. She nodded again, her silence forming walls he could no longer accept. In the study, he shut the door softly behind him. The monitor loomed in the corner, waiting, expectant. His fingers hesitated over the keypad before entering the code. The footage sprang to life once more. He leaned forward, his pulse tight. The footage rolled in quiet frames, yesterday's hours compressed into seconds. David fast-forwarded through the routine. The staff moving in and out, deliveries at the gate, sunlight crawling across polished floors like a tide. His thumb hovered, then stilled at the moment that made his pulse falter. 3:12 p.m. The kitchen. The back door opened, and Eleanor stepped inside. Her pearl earrings caught the light, her every movement sharp, deliberate. She didn't glance toward the camera. Of course she didn't. People who believe they own a place never remembered it could look back. David leaned closer, his jaw tightening as he scrubbed the timeline forward. At first, the scene was almost cordial. A faint smile on Aisha's lips, a small exchange of words. But the air changed quickly. Eleanor's chin tipped downward, her eyes narrowing, her posture radiating disdain. Aisha's shoulders shrank, her hand pressing protectively to her belly. The mask dropped. Eleanor's fingers stabbed the air, lips shaping a sentence David didn't need sound to understand. "You don't belong here." Aisha said nothing. Her silence was a shield, but Eleanor pressed harder, stepping into her space, eyes ablaze with cold fury. The camera captured the moment Eleanor's hand clamped around Aisha's arm and shoved. Aisha staggered back against the counter, her face twisting in pain, one hand flying to steady her child. David's throat closed. His mother's face remained composed, even serene, as though this cruelty were simply order being restored. He rewound, watched it again, slower this time, every frame etching itself into his memory. A new clip appeared, Eleanor lingering in the nursery, her gaze fixed on the crib like it was an intruder. Another, her blocking Aisha's path with a chair, her mouth forming words that looked like a verdict. And then the slap, sudden, unceremonious, the soundless crack somehow louder than any thunder. Aisha braced against the counter, blinking fast, swallowing the sob that threat.